everyone. Welcome to another Everything Hollywood podcast with my friend Larry Namer. Hi, Larry.
Thank you, thank you. It's another interesting week in Hollywood.
Yes.
This week, our show is kind of interesting. We're focusing on Marilyn Monroe. It's the 59th anniversary of her death. And
I can't believe that. But before we talk about that, let's talk about COVID to see what's going on because I know things are kind of going backwards if I'm understanding correctly. So can you take us through what's going on?
Sure, you have the Delta variant, which is just wreaking havoc in the Hollywood community. It's really gotten bad. The hospital beds are filling up, and there's no room in intensive care units and all of that stuff. And a lot of the agencies, the talent agencies, the management agencies, the law firms that service the Hollywood community, most of them were thinking of reopening and having people come back to work. But to the one, like all the majors have now said definitely they're not opening up in August, probably not going to open up in September, and the earliest that they're going to call people back to work is going to be October. So that's, it sets, things back from, production and that now having to be especially careful of that to just deal making. I mean, when the agents and the managers and the lawyers are not in the office or you can't get them to go to lunch or dinners, it just sets the deal-making process back so far. What used to take you 2 days to get accomplished now takes you 2 weeks. So it's getting pretty bad out there.
So you think that that's going to really delay? So they have rules now where everyone needs to be vaccinated if you're on set, correct?
Yeah.
And still wear masks, right?
Yeah.
And then get tested every week.
And then you have, people who are shooting on locations all around the world, and now those locations have breakouts. So they're not allowing, people in from other countries. So those productions need to be postponed or rewritten or changed or whatever. So it's a mess. It's,
Because a lot of our productions are done in Canada too, right? So is it difficult to go to Canada?
It's difficult to go to Canada. It's difficult for people from Canada to come here. But also just, all throughout Europe. I mean, the media and entertainment business has become global. There's no question. So you shoot all around the world. I mean, before this pandemic, I was shooting a TV show in Croatia. You can't do that now. They don't want Americans coming in with, the Delta variant. And there's variants that are coming from India and UK and stuff that we don't want here. So it's just created this whole, theme of uncertainty of when, this stuff can really get back to anything resembling and, what used to be a normal.
Wow, this is really sad to hear. We're going backwards. I thought we're making some progress, but then everything is just going back. And it's setting everybody back. So let's take a short break. But when we come back, let's talk some more about what's going on in Hollywood. And of course, before we go to the big Marilyn week that we're talking about, so excited about that, we'll be right back.
We're all fans of something or someone, investing our time and loyalty, but getting little in return. Well, it's about to change forever with Fanvestor, a platform that lets you get in on celebrity businesses early on, buy shares of their new startups, support a charity and new product drops, and share once-in-a-lifetime experiences with them.
What's up, it's Omar Akram here, and we're launching Masa with Fanvestor to offer a limited edition, perks, products, and experience to my fans.
Here's how it works. Go to fanvestor.com. Choose an opportunity you want to get in on. Click here and there, and you're done. Go check your email for the investor's certificate. And don't forget to check back often for updates on your new business investment. It's official now. Celebrate your support with an experience. Go 10 rounds in the gym with Amare, get a matching tattoo with super dope Q, or get on FaceTime and hang out by the pool with DJ Khaled. After all, you're more than a fan now. You're a Fanvestor.
Welcome back. Larry, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on and making some really big headlines in Hollywood, and that is Scarlett Johansson. And I think we touched on it last week about suing Disney, and now we have Emma Stone, same thing happening with Disney, and other stars that are kind of getting into it with other big studios. So, what are your thoughts? What's going on here? I'm hearing different sides. I'm hearing, people are saying, yeah, the stars are correct to sue the studios, and then the studios are saying, well, we have the right to show the movie because of the pandemic to our streaming platform. So, can you simplify this a little bit for us, and what's going on with that?
Sure. Well, the whole thing is really beginning to, to get so much wider than just the Scarlett Johansson case. I mean, like you mentioned, Emma Stone suing for, her involvement in Cruella. John Krasinski now, The Quiet Place 2 is suing Paramount, and it'll continue. But you really get down to it. So while these contracts are not out in the public to read, the lawyers for these people should have been much more hip to what goes on technology-wise. The pandemic, one thing, but releasing stuff day and date and being able to charge, that's not going away. I mean, it's a great business model for the studios and stuff. So, like in the Scarlett case, her contract calls for her to get paid a percentage of ticket sales. Well, if people are watching it on TV, that, theoretically, some of those people might have gone to the theater if they didn't get on TV, so it would have been increased box office revenue, and therefore her take would have been higher. But again, why didn't the lawyers understand that this, is not just a dream that somebody's having, but this is going to be more and more part of the release pattern of, every major theatrical film. So, historically in Hollywood, I mean, this is not new. When you look at when video cassettes came out, the actor contracts and the guild agreements didn't really cover that stuff at the beginning. And then when it happened, they saw all the money that was being made. The next time those contracts came around, it was all included. You'll see that here. Now everybody's hip to the fact that, this is going to be part of the distribution pattern, and that'll end up in the contracts, it'll end up in the guild agreements. But for this go around, it's going to be interesting because from my understanding, this stuff is not covered in those talent agreements and stuff. And, the studio's going, we have the right to do it, and it doesn't say you should get paid for this, that, so why should we be paying you? So, I understand the talent side of it, and I understand the studio side of it. It needs to be dealt with in, future legal agreements.
And when the videotapes came out, the theaters were freaking out too, right? It's kind of like how the theaters are freaking out now regarding how these studios are releasing it on their own streaming platform, right? Yeah. Same kind of thing is happening with that too.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was part of the timing video group at the time when we started this new thing called home box office. I hate to date myself, but, people did the movies and they got paid on theatrical box office. But then all of a sudden they found that they could sell these movies for like HBO and Showtime and make a heck of a lot of money. But yet that first round of movies that went to the pay services, the actors and directors and the copyright owners weren't really paid on that because it wasn't specifically covered in the contract. It catches up, but until it catches up, it's a mess, and it needs to be dealt with in a very clear legal manner.
Yeah, no, I agree. So let's take a short break, and when we come back, let's talk about Marilyn.
I think we have a great guest coming up.
Yes, we'll be right back.
The reason why I created Hair Dope is because hair colors are popping everywhere. A lot of people, your favorite rappers, your favorite singers, your favorite artists, whoever, they're dyeing their hair, they're doing things like that, and this is a world full of color, so I feel like I want to feel like everyone can express themselves through my color. Well, to me, the importance of entrepreneurship is having a career that's longevity. You know, a lot of people jump into the game and into careers of being an entrepreneur and not having longevity in what they're doing. So that's what I really feel like. You have to put your all into it. It has to be from the heart. You have to have longevity. You have to be able to stay in and stay active.
Welcome back. So let's talk about Marilyn being 59th year of her death. I can't believe it was 59 years ago that she passed away.
It's amazing.
And so many mystery, surrounding her death, first of all. What do you think made her so special, but at the same time mysterious? And we're still talking about her.
Yeah, it is amazing that it's 59 years ago since she died and stuff. And, in a lot of ways, it seems like, very recent. But, the times are different. Marilyn is an iconic figure. There's from the body of work that she did to, just the mystery that surrounded her, with going out with great, playwrights, going out with the great baseball players.
Yeah.
The rumors about, the Kennedys, that she was with both John and Bobby. And then the whole mystery of her death. So, so back then, you really didn't have all the social media stuff. So the stars of those eras remained a mystery to a lot of people. Her and James Dean, and in music you had Joplin and Hendrix and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, starting, I hate to say it, but with E, where it used to, maybe you got 10 seconds on the news about someone, to all of a sudden, digging into, a week of their life and stuff. So a lot of the mystery was removed. And then you kind of put that on steroids, now with the internet and social media. If you want to know what Scarlett Johansson had for breakfast, you could go online and probably find that out.
Yeah, and you saw that, right? When you did that there's a huge appetite for that, right? That people want to know more and more about the stars, correct? You saw that, right?
Yeah. That's what made E go, we just looked at it and said, people love Hollywood gossip. And, on a global level, and, it's not just a U.S. thing.
Yeah, so we got to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk more about Marilyn.
Cause I had no idea. I feel like I did too much. I feel like I did too much. Let's get loud, yeah, I need all, yeah. I feel like I did too much. I feel like I did too much. Yeah, let's party, yeah, I need all, yeah.
What's up? It's Omar Akram here, and we're launching Masa with Fanvestor to offer a limited edition, perks, products, and experience to my fans.
I let little shawty come here and take your place. Keep my love, you too excited.
Welcome back. We're talking about Marilyn and about the mystery and her, just the aura of Marilyn, like so many people just love to talk about her still. And I know just recently there was an auction where someone paid over $4 million for a dress that she wore.
That white dress.
The white dress, yes. And I want to ask you about that. All the stuff that is going on, and it still keeps going and going, about Marilyn. And what is so special now? I don't know. I guess if someone paid $4 million, they're, obviously a huge fan, and, they want to be a part of, Hollywood history, right?
Yeah, you look at it, like I say, so you start with the body of work, but then you take, this essentially a small town girl comes to Hollywood and, Norma Jean, and becomes not just a star, but a global superstar.
Yeah.
just superstar status all around the world. So she became very identifiable for people, and she became aspirational. People wanted to dress like Marilyn, look like Marilyn, talk like Marilyn, etc. And it still perpetuates to this day. I mean, you look at some of the memorabilia.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the dresses and stuff, and I think the piano sold recently,
Yeah.
the white piano.
Right.
Then you take other stuff, like even myself. I bought at auction. I bought the marriage license between Marilyn and Joe DiMaggio.
That's incredible.
So I got that, and the more the myth and the legacy of Marilyn continues to grow, hopefully the value of my marriage license.
Yes.
higher.
And interestingly enough, our next guest is someone that knew Marilyn personally.
We've got George Shakira. So
yes.
I mean, George first looks amazing. I mean, but
he looks amazing.
But he was in, I think, 3 movies with Marilyn. So
yes.
He knew Marilyn, personally.
Yes.
But also, you look at the life that George had. I mean, West Side Story. I mean, he was, with Natalie Wood. So to go from Natalie Wood to Marilyn Monroe, not bad. George is certainly a guy, and he looks amazing. George is up there now, but he still looks great, and he's got great stories about the time on the set with Marilyn and getting to know her, and just when he describes the presence she had, just coming in the room and her ability to relate to people, whether they be big or small or whatever, and that's part of what kept really helped build this whole icon status for her.
So happy to have him on the show. We'll be right back with George Shakira.
Yeah. Well, this year I think it's coming up in August, it's the 59th anniversary of Marilyn Monroe's death. And
wow,
isn't that amazing? It seems like just
I know, yeah.
And you've actually met her. You were in like 2 or 3 movies with her, weren't you?
Well, I got to be behind her a couple of times. First, the most important one, I guess, is I was one of the guys behind her in Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend from Gentlemen for Blondes, choreographed by the incredible Jack Cole.
So we were talking about your experience with Marilyn and stuff. How many movies were you in with her? It was a few.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
How many movies were you in with Marilyn? Because it's more than one.
I was an extra in How to Marry a Millionaire for a whole day.
Right.
I was in Gentlemen for Blondes and that incredible number. And I was one of the guys in the number that Robert Alton did for her that she never did because Jack Cole did it. Robert Alton's version of the Heatwave number, and I was around her a couple of other times. Just one was there was a party at the end of a rehearsal day for No Business Like Show Business, and we were all invited to it. So it was on a sound stage, and all the kids got to come too. So it was great. And again, she arrived with a couple of gentlemen. I keep saying it, but it's what happened. Very quietly. She drew no attention to herself, but she was just very quiet. She was just there. And the girl who was my dancing partner in that movie, Drusilla Davis, great friend, she said, "Why don't I go over and ask Marilyn to give you a kiss on the cheek?" And I said, no. Well, Drusilla did it anyway, and Marilyn was in earshot, and so Drew goes over to and says, would you give that boy a kiss on the cheek? And Marilyn, very sweetly, just calmly and simply looked in my direction. She said, but I don't know him. I love that.
That's crazy. That's funny. That is really funny.
One other thing, there's an 8x10 still black and white picture. Dan Daly, Donald O'Connor, Johnny Ray, Mitzi, and on the right Marilyn, and they're all just waiting. Nobody's saying anything. They're just waiting to work. On the right side, Marilyn is talking to a little kid. I love that. She's talking to a little kid, and she, I think those things say a lot about her, and I've always thought if if I knew her, I would like who she is. I think she was. I thought she was kind, and that's the big one. I think for me, I thought she was sweet and kind and good.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, like I say, it's the 59th anniversary of her death, and she's, just larger than life. She's
Yeah,
as
yeah,
big as ever. But
yeah.
before we wrap up, I have to ask you these questions. You look amazing. How do you do it?
Oh my God! Thank you.
Yes, we were just talking about that when we got, a little while ago.
I'm not a natural blonde. For a start, you know what? I think it's exercise. I think it's dancing. Almost every dancer I've ever known
Yeah.
and still knows, they first of all, I've never gained weight. I've always been sort of on the slim side, and I think that helps. And I've always been a strong believer in moisturizers and that stuff because it just feels right to do it. And that's basic. And also, I think genetically, I was lucky because of my family, my mother and my father, especially my mother. My mother lived to be 104,
Wow.
and she was something else herself. Yeah.
What it also helps that you're
So
a
I
handsome
guess
guy too.
Well, the good genes, I guess, is what I think of it just talking about this.
Yeah.
But on my mother's side, especially, I think good genes. Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Well, George, we really want to thank you. This has been quite fun for us, an honor, and it's amazing to see you looking as good as you are. And
thank you.
we wish you many, many more years, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very
My
much, George.
pleasure.
Really, it
I
was a
love
lot of
talking to
fun. Yes,
I
thank
really
you.
enjoyed talking to both of you. Thank you so much.
Take care, George.
Okay.
Thank you,
Welcome
George.
back to the show. Larry, one of the things that, we still talk about the mystery of Marilyn Monroe, right? I mean, like the fact that she passed away when she was only in her 30s and even adds more to the mystery of her and her life, right? And, that's what I was going to ask you because some of these Hollywood stars that have passed on, very young, there's something about them like, James Dean or, Janis Joplin or, you know, Jimi Hendrix, to some extent Jim Belushi, or is it John Belushi, right?
John Belushi,
John
yeah.
Belushi. What is it that people are so fascinated
Well,
by that?
I mean, they all died young,
Yes.
and they all died at the pinnacle of their career. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't have gotten any bigger than they were at the time of their
Yes.
death.
Yes.
And then the circumstances surrounding the death in all of these cases were never quite clear. I mean, so Marilyn, they found a bottle of pills, but they're saying, did she kill herself? Did she accidentally overdose? Was she killed? There's these rumors about the Kennedys, being involved in that, and the mafia guy being involved in that. So there's just all these great, interesting stories that surround it, which just keep it going, from forever.
And that's why we have an incredible guest, Nina Bolsky, who talks about that, actually, about the mystery of her death and the circumstances. She's really an expert in that.
Yeah, Nina's been doing this for a while, and she's got actually a few projects coming up, which I'll let her talk about. But you're coming up on the 60th anniversary of Marilyn's death, and there's all kinds of stuff there. And Nina's been following this and doing very thorough research on it, and she's got some theories that haven't really been out there yet. And I think the audience will be very interested in hearing what she has to say.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll be back with Nina Bolsky. Well, Larry, being the 59th anniversary of Marilyn's death, very historic. And I know there's a lot of events taking place all over the world, celebrating her life. And we have a special guest in the studio today. Why don't you introduce her, please?
Sure. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. I think the Marilyn phenomenon is, it just grows every year, and this is she would have been 95 this year, and it's the 59th anniversary of her death. So I thought it'd be great to bring in who I know to be kind of the leading expert in Marilyn Monroe things, true and false, and talk to her. So I'd like to introduce you to Nina.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here, guys.
So, before we get to Marilyn, tell us a little bit about you, Nina.
Well, I have a company called Life Bites Global, and so I've been on the front end in terms of hosting shows in the past. I've produced short segments, and now what I'm doing is I've gotten involved in this whole Marilyn project. So I've become a producer, not from the standpoint of, the funding of something, but actually producing the content. So I've always been a content producer, but Life Bites Global actually deals with life, business, and media. So this is the media side. And all things Marilyn, I seem to be, once she gets inside your soul, it's hard to let her go.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've known you from before Marilyn days and then the Marilyn days.
Well, Larry. No,
this I won't go into that.
No, I have to tell you. You know what is funny, and I did tell you this story. So when the E Entertainment Channel was Movie Time, I was auditioning with Katie Wagner for the hostess position back in the day.
And rejected you?
Yeah, well, you know what happened. I won't go into detail, but they basically said, "Oh, Nina, we're going with the California look," and I'm like, "Okay, she was definitely not the California look. I wasn't either, but that's a whole backstory. You did fill me in." So.
Well, but yeah, when you think about it,
Larry, come on.
I hate to admit this one, but it'll make you feel better. I also rejected Ryan Seacrest.
Woo!
So,
hey, there's
I
hope
just
here.
Went, nice boy, but he's never going to be a good host.
You had me come back like 3 or 4 or 5 times. I was like, oh my gosh.
Close. But what was it that triggered you to get into the whole Marilyn thing?
Gosh, I'd like to say that I just fell into it, which I did. I became a networker. You're a networker, I'm a networker. And I was doing a Life Bites digital television show, actually one of the first on YouTube. And so this guy comes to me and he goes, I've got this book and it's called No City for Dreaming, and I really want to make it into a movie. And I'm thinking, I market movies. I do, more of the front end of a movie when it's ready to be put out there, not the back end. And I said, well, let me see what I can do. And so that started the journey on Marilyn, which gave us our first project was Goodnight Marilyn, which is a thriller noir around the last 3 days of Marilyn's death. So, or life,
how do you
I should say.
Research that? I mean, what did you go through?
Well, the funny thing about Goodnight Marilyn is I just jumped in and I started bringing in people, and all of a sudden, within 6 months, we had 2 offers on the table. And you're going to love this. And we were going to Cannes. We had our distribution company. And I sat there very kind of egotistically and thought to myself, man, this funding stuff is easy. Until it wasn't. Yeah. And so we, the one that we went with fell out of escrow because one of the producers, it was a Jon Favreau film, and they basically took his film and took the funds out of the escrow account, which they weren't supposed to do. And so all the funding sources dried up, and there you go. So, and then that's what led me to do a radio show. I thought, okay, let's get some publicity going. And so we started Goodnight Marilyn Radio, and that's where the investigation of Marilyn's death came into play.
Wow, crazy stuff.
So you probably have done a lot of research on Marilyn. Larry's a little bit more knowledgeable in this than I am, but what would you say some of the misconception about Marilyn? Some of the things that people perhaps don't know?
Oh, that's
little
a great
tidbits.
question.
Obviously everybody knows who Marilyn is, but a lot of people don't really know her. Maybe we've seen movies from her, like in my case, for instance. But I'm interested to know more. So maybe you could tell us something a little bit more.
That's a beautiful question, because I thought what most people think is she is the character Marilyn Monroe. And what you start to find out as you start to look into her life is she was so much more deep and vulnerable and sensitive and resilient, which most people don't know. And I think the key thing is she's certainly not a dumb blonde. And most people think she's that ditzy kind of cute little, very beautiful movie star that's a little dingy. She's far from it. So she's really actually quite bright. So that would be one thing.
Wow, excellent.
But, this has intrigued me. I do a lot of stuff in China. And when, a few years ago, we were doing this show called Hello Hollywood, and it was coming up on, it was kind of July, and it was like, right before Marilyn's, the anniversary of her death. And when we had the meetings about what to cover, it was amazing. The Chinese are going, well, we got to be covering the Marilyn Monroe things that are going on. I'm like, how in the world would they have known Marilyn Monroe? But it just seems that even though we're like 59 years past her death, the legend of Marilyn, the story of Marilyn, just continues to grow. What do you attribute that to?
I think there's a couple things, but it is hard. It's kind of a little, it's weird to think that a movie star, 59 years later, if I said to an intern that's 23 years old, do you know Clark Gable, Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon? Most of them would not know. If I say, do you know Marilyn Monroe? Absolutely. 14 million plus Facebook fans, and she keeps growing. So I can talk to a 12-year-old and they're going to know her, and I can talk to a 96-year-old and they're going to know her, and everybody in between. I think really what fascinates people with Marilyn is there is a mystery around her death. That's one thing. But I think the key that keeps her longevity going is her sense of vulnerability. You can say she's a beautiful movie star, and that's true. There's a lot of beautiful movie stars. But what makes her unique and different is her vulnerability. She has the ability to say things that most people during that time didn't. And so you have a lot of not broken people, but people that have maybe can relate to Marilyn's story, and they start to identify with her, and then that starts to grow and grow and grow. So I think it's partly her death is a mystery, and then partly the movie star, and partly her vulnerability.
Interesting. So some of what intrigues me is, you look at movie stars today and kind of our impression of what's a beautiful woman, and they're like skinny kind of things. Marilyn was far from it. I mean, she was like a real woman.
She very curvy, but I also think that she would go up and down in her weight, but she really was still a very small size, even though curvy. So she just used it to her advantage back in the day. So I think that, you'll see shots of her really skinny and quite slender, and then you'll see, shots of her maybe during Some Like It Hot, where she recently had a miscarriage. So there was a lot of things that kind of contributed to that up and down weight, right?
So for someone who's done a lot of research about her, do you think that her death was a suicide or homicide?
Oh,
sorry, I had to ask that.
Well, that's a loaded question. I have to tell you. So we did a segment with Fox last year, and I posted on Goodnight Marilyn's Facebook page. Do you think that she was murdered by the Kennedys, mob, government, etc., or do you think that she overdosed or committed suicide? The backlash that I got on that page and the social media back and forth, if people think she's murdered, there's a reason why. It might be not the truth. It might be these belief systems that now, after decades, cultural beliefs that I see a documentary, I see a book that comes out, or I read a book, I start to believe that as fact. And people 20, 30 years ago, they don't have the time to be able to research that. So you go back in time and you realize some of the stuff that we thought was true is actually just a rumor. And the problem with it is a lot of these television biographies, what they'll do is they'll take one truth and then they'll make it a rumor. And so it'll become a rumor. So here's an example. I had somebody come on the show who worked at Marilyn's PR agency at the time when she was with the Arthur Jacobs agency. He came out on national television on our show and said that Marilyn was drinking the day she died. We come out and we find out there was no alcohol in Marilyn's system at all. So you sit there and you think these are potentially credible people that lived back in that time are actually stating things that they don't really know.
So what are your thoughts?
So, oh, yes. So I came into this thinking that she was murdered, for sure. I thought there was no way that there was nobody that was going to change my mind. And I thought for sure I was just proving that. And then as you start to uncover the story and I start to get very credible experts, I start to realize. So, for example, there's another thing that you'll hear from people. She didn't have any crystals in her stomach. And so I thought, oh my God, of course. So if you ingest all these pills, you're going to have crystals in your stomach. So you think. So the average Joe would believe that. What ends up happening, so we had Dr. Cyril Weck, who's a very famous forensic psychologist on the show, and he says the reason why she had no crystals in her stomach was the fact that she didn't die right away. She was in kind of like a coma state for a few hours. So the body was still functioning. So even though, she, quote, died that night, she didn't die right away. And so that speaks to the fact that her body was still processing a lot of the stuff that was in her stomach, which was very little because she didn't eat that much that day. So when you start to add up the evidence versus the rumors, that's where you get into the conflict, and most people just don't take the time.
So the time before that she tried to commit suicide, Peter Lawford came and helped her, right? Is that correct?
No.
Like the time before.
The time, yeah,
You bought into the gossip.
yeah.
You
No.
bought
But she
in.
did.
No,
She
'cause
did.
I
She
read
did.
that
Yeah,
somewhere recently,
several
actually.
times she did try to commit suicide. So she had suicidal thoughts. She did want to die several times. But you've also got to take it into context, which most people don't do, around her mental health. So Marilyn would have been diagnosed, and this is just a theory right now, and she was diagnosed with bipolar. But there's chances that at that time, borderline personality was not a disorder in the as we use it today. But she would probably have been diagnosed as a borderline and a bipolar. So borderline personalities are through trauma. That's how we get some of the distinct characteristics of a borderline personality, and bipolar is in the brain. So that's the best way to kind of decipher those two. But what would happen is you have something called a mixed episode. So I used to think you're either manic or you're, kind of like lethargic. And when somebody's in a mixed episode, you think somebody's going to write a suicide note and tell everybody goodbye. But a lot of times in suicides, that just doesn't happen. So if somebody is agitated and they are off, they are sleep deprived, which she was, her doctors prescribed her 900 pills several months before she died. 700 of them were sleeping pills. So they would have been responsible for her death as well. So regardless of what you think she was murdered or not, her two doctors should have known better, even back then. I asked a psychiatrist about that, and they said no, even back in the day, they should have known better. And they were I think they were trying to manage her, but you guys know, you're in Hollywood, right? Try to manage a celebrity's, addiction,
yeah.
right?
But she was by herself, right?
Yeah, she was that night. Well, she wasn't. She actually wasn't. Her press agent had slept over the night before, and Marilyn did not sleep well that night. She got up. She had barely anything to eat that day. She went into the garden. She was very agitated with her press agent, and probably about 3:30, 4 in the afternoon, she called her psychiatrist, who came over for a couple of hours. But he also needed to leave because he had an engagement that night. So she called him because Joe DiMaggio's son had called her to say that he had called off his wedding, and she was very glad about that because she didn't like who he was going to be marrying. And she already supposedly, according to Joan Greenson, Dr. Greenson's her psychiatrist daughter, that she'd already sounded a little slurry when Dr. Greenson had called her back before he left, or before she actually called him and said, "Hey, I just heard from Joe's son," and she was very happy for that moment. So people will like to categorize her as happy or she's sad. And what we don't realize is we're not putting in the mental illness factor of it. Somebody with mental illness like that can be really excited 1 minute and very down the next.
And that leads us to one of the other projects you're doing, which has to do with mental health and stuff. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, so we have a podcast, a dramatic podcast, which is Marilyn Behind the Icon. And Gary Vitacco-Robles, who is a best-selling author, has volume 1, 2, and 3 will be out next year at the 60th anniversary of her death. But he is a mental health expert. And so the wonderful thing about Gary, he deals with bipolar, borderline personalities, and people that are going through trauma every single day. And so that deals with the mental health component. We're just coming out of a pandemic. As you guys all know, mental health is really severely affected with people's stress and overwhelm, and addiction is way up and stuff as well.
Big issue.
Yeah.
Big issue.
Yeah.
And what else are you working on that has to do with Marilyn?
Marilyn. So we've got and I think you know Erin Gavin. She's our actress that plays Marilyn. And
Who's Scottish, if I
she's
remember?
Scottish. And when I first heard her talk, I was like, how can she do that, right?
I had the same thing when I first met Erin, and she's got a thick Scottish accent. And she told me she's doing Marilyn. I was like, really?
Yeah, how in the world could you do that? But beautiful girl, resembles and has that essence of Marilyn. Yeah. She's such a sweet, sweet soul, a sensitive soul like Marilyn, but she's got the acting chops. And so this acting podcast, really, if you really want to know Marilyn, it opens with her in the psychiatric ward in 1961. So just imagine one of the most famous movie stars not knowing what she's getting herself into. All of her belongings are taken away, and she's put in a straitjacket and basically doesn't have any contact with anybody. And it was Joe DiMaggio that actually called the hospital. She got a note out and called the hospital and said, if you don't get her out by tomorrow, like 1 o'clock, I am going to take this hospital apart brick by brick. And sure enough, she was out the next day.
Joe could have done that,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So, and then American Icon is the TV docuseries that deals with the mental health, but also the mystery around her death, which will be out for her 60th anniversary. So we're working on that one as well. So
You're busy. You're doing a lot of projects.
They seem to be all around Marilyn.
Let's put you on the spot. What's your favorite Marilyn movie?
Some Like It Hot. It was my favorite movie before I knew Marilyn. People think, oh my God, you must be the biggest fan of Marilyn. How could you be doing all these projects? I kind of came into this. I like her, but I don't dislike her, but I don't love her. Now I would say that I love her. I mean, she's an interesting soul. There's a lot of people that don't have the depth that she has and the duality. People want to put her in a box, and I think that's also where the mystery is. You asked me, what about her, Nina, makes her so fascinating? And I think that you can't really quite figure her out. You think she's this way, and she ends up being that. She was a person who would read books. She had like 400 books in her library. Some of the most, she was very well read in terms of politics. She kept up on that. So most people just overlook that and just talk about the Kennedys and not the fact that she really liked diving into deep conversations. Carl Sandburg was one of her.
How many movies has she done?
She has done probably close to, if not 35, 36, somewhere around there. So she didn't do just a few, and the ones that we know obviously are Some Like It Hot, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire, 7-Year Itch, but some of her other ones that don't get as much claim is Niagara, which she plays a villain in that one, and then there's Bus Stop that you get to really see her acting chops that she didn't really get a chance to see.
That's the one I was going to ask you, Larry. What's your favorite Marilyn?
I like Bus Stop. Actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I wanna. Now that we're getting into Marilyn, I want to watch
the Marilyn season.
You guys got to recommend the movie. I don't want to watch I've seen Some Like It Hot, but something that is not like a mainstream Marilyn
Bus Stop
movie.
was kind of like, that was Marilyn kind of thing.
Was that one of her beginning, like one of her first
earlier.
movies?
It was
earlier, not complete,
yeah.
Okay.
And we heard so much about her, her love life and her marriages and stuff like that. But I'll tell you the one that fascinates me, because I'm a long diehard Yankee fan, is the whole Joe DiMaggio thing, because they seem to be almost eternal love kind of thing. I mean, the flowers to the grave and all of that stuff.
And the protection that he provided for her. I think, their courtship was a little, it was fast and furious. And then, Joe was a typical Italian, wanted his wife back in the day to stay home and to cook. And I think innately she wanted that, but her career was on the rise. I mean, she was at the height of her stardom. And I think Joe had been so used to being the one of when you came into a room, you'd say, "Oh my God, it's Joe DiMaggio," and he was already retired, so he wasn't getting any of the attention, and it was Marilyn. And what broke them up was, that famous, 7-year itch with the white dress, and he came to New York City, and he came out in the middle of the night. It was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. They were filming that scene, and he saw all these men heckling at his wife, and she was just having a good old time with she was having fun. She was being Marilyn, right? And he was not having any of it. And that was the beginning of the end. And she, that was not a fun night for her or probably for Joe. But you'll hear in the podcast, there's a scene where Joe actually apologizes to Marilyn for the things that he's doing. And he actually, you'll appreciate this too, is that he got into therapy. Joe DiMaggio got into therapy.
Wow, that is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, to think that we're coming up. I mean, the thought that it's 59 years is just mind-boggling and stuff. So, well, we're going to need to wrap up, but I'll give you some hard questions. The Kennedys, true or false? We hear she was with both Jack and Bobby.
So here's the evidence. I'll tell you this. The evidence shows that most likely she had an affair with JFK, which is not, you can go, okay. And it happened where we can prove the weekend of March 21st, 23rd, that weekend of 1962, that spring. She was invited out to Bing Crosby's house, and JFK was going to be there as well. And the reason why we know that is Ralph Roberts, her massage/driver, heard her talking in the car about it. But in terms of Bobby Kennedy, that one I'm going to lean towards no, and I'll tell you why. Is that she wasn't attracted to somebody like Peter Lawford, who was a very good-looking man. She was attracted to powerful men, but Bobby Kennedy was married, and she had a relationship with Ethel Kennedy, and there's evidence that talks about them as a couple. She honored marriage if she knew, I don't want to say if she knew the wife, but what she did like about Bobby Kennedy is Bobby Kennedy's strength, his connection to the president. And there's also in the docu-series that we're going to be doing, American Icon, is we're going to start to reveal the evidence that talks about Bobby Kennedy potentially being in LA the day she died. But I want to have you guys think about this for a second. Could it be that she died as an overdose? However, if she had an affair with JFK, just to put it in the perspective of today, if you had, well, we won't say Biden, but let's say Donald Trump or Obama, and they had a relationship with the most powerful or most sexy movie star in the world at one time, and let's say it was over, and that star died. Marilyn did write and did have a journal, right? Wouldn't the government come in and just clean everything up? So just because they could have been in relationship doesn't necessarily mean that they killed her. So where the investigation really lands, and nobody's ever done this, is to really go underneath the hood and really look at the hard evidence. Everybody talks about it, but what happens is that our brains are set up. If I hear information about Marilyn's story and I'm predisposed like I was, Marilyn was killed. Nobody was going to change my mind. I had a 75-year-old woman come up to me and just press me in the chest. You're not going to change my mind about this, right? And I thought, you're right. I'm not going to. And the only way I'm going to be able to do it is if I start having a discussion or relationship and I show you and you get to decide for yourself. But nobody is mechanically or visually, they talk about in these documentaries, oh, she was da-da-da, like I am with you guys. But if I break down the evidence, then we get to start to look at other alternatives, but not until I do that, because right now I'm so set in my belief system. So.
Got it.
Wow, this has been so informative, Larry. I've learned so much today from you. So
I've come away with more questions than I do.
yeah,
answers.
well, we still got
Hey.
questions. Right.
So we'll have to be back next year when we do the
Whoa,
60th anniversary. Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen? I mean, the 60th is like
Huge.
a monumental thing.
You guys, I'm still blown away. Most of us would be lucky if we got 50 people at our funeral. Let's just say.
Oh.
There's 1,000 to 2,000 people that will be at her memorial service from all over the world. Even in her every year memorials, and every year they have one at the Westwood Memorial Park where she's buried. And there are hundreds of people every year, regardless if it's a monumental birthday like this one is. So yeah, it's going to be huge. And people come in from Germany, from France, from Canada, from China.
So we have to go. I mean, we're not even that far. If people are coming from China, Larry, you and I have to go from here.
We're going to have to do something fun next year for her 60th.
Thank you, Nina, for joining us.
Oh, thank you
thank
guys.
We're going to definitely have you back for the 60th.
Oh, yeah.
For
So it'll be fun.
Very insightful. Thank you for being
Alrighty.
here.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Larry, it's amazing so many projects are being developed around Marilyn's name and about her life. What are some of the projects that you've heard about?
Well, like I say, you're looking at the 60th anniversary coming up next August. So it's really kind of a special thing. So there's a lot of projects that are coming into play. There's a play, a live theater play that unfortunately got derailed by COVID about Marilyn. Our guest, Nina Boski, is doing not just a documentary about it and kind of investigative, but she's also doing a theatrical film, a regular film.
She's doing a play too, right? Or a film?
She's doing film. Somebody, Sandro Minetti was doing the play, if I recall. And, Kate Reese Davies, who's going to be on soon, she's, writing a TV series. They'll go to Netflix or Amazon or something, again, related to, the life and death of Marilyn.
But I forgot there was one of the projects that you and I were going to play a gangster. Was that in a Maryland project that you and I had a part?
I'm willing to play a gangster in anything that anybody's willing to offer me. I just think that...
Was it Nina that said, I have a part for you guys?
If I'm, ever going to be in front of the camera, I want to be a Brooklyn gangster because I could really do that role without stretching too hard.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So let's talk about our next guest, Kate Reese Davies. She's developing a television project, right?
Yeah.
Around Maryland.
Yeah, she's been, developing a multi-part, series. For the digital networks, again, Netflix or Amazon are the prime targets for her show. And she's been working on it for some time, and she's got, some interesting take on, the whole Maryland situation. Plus, I think, her idea of how it ends, I think is quite different than anything else we've seen out there.
Yes. Yes, I think that's going to be very interesting. So I can't wait to talk to her about her project. And we'll be back with Kate Reese Davies. Thank you guys very, very much. And
stay with us and you'll see Kate.
And you will see Kate in just a little bit. Hi, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you. Larry, please introduce our lovely guest for the day.
Sure. Kate Reese Davies, been, in the movie business for a while. We've known each other. We've been on panels together for years and stuff, so we're old buds, and even though Kate has this accent, she is in Los Angeles, And
Yeah.
welcome, Kate. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited, and it's great to see you again, Larry. It's been a little while, and lovely to meet you, Omar, at last.
Thank you.
Reading about what you guys are doing. It's fantastic over there.
Yeah. So before we really get into your current project, give us a little bit of background on you.
Yeah, so I'm a director, producer, and writer, originally from the UK. I've been living now in Los Angeles for 12 years. I came here to study acting originally, and then transitioned into UCLA to study directing, which I loved dearly. That's really my passion, is directing. Looking to get my first episode of TV hopefully over the next 12 months. I've shadowed on TV shows. I've had a theatrical release with a feature that I directed in the US, which was fantastic. It's now playing on Amazon. And I've done several short films. I've produced heaps of stuff. A little short I produced is currently in Tribeca.
And so,
and I've had to play at Cannes.
oh, you've actually, a lot of our audience are aspiring to get into the media or the entertainment world, and you use the term that I think we need to explain for our audience. When you say you have shadowed, what does that mean?
So you get to watch the director work. You are kind of like a shadow of that director. So I've done it a few times now. It's a great learning process, because you actually get to see how the day runs on set, and how the director works with the actors and the rest of the crew, and how the set is run. So I've shadowed Jill Soloway on Transparent, which was the big, very successful Amazon show based on her father's sort of life story loosely. I also shadowed Bruce Beresford, who's an Oscar nominated director, and he was directing a film with Jane Fonda at the time in New York State, which was very exciting. I spent 3 days over there with them, which was really, really a lot of fun. So
Oh, very cool. See, Omar, you learned something today.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what that was. I thought Larry is shadowing me on this show to learn everything that I do, but but thank you for clarifying that, because I wasn't sure what that meant. Actually, before the show, I was asking Larry what that meant. So the fact that you clarified that. But what do you find rewarding about directing and producing? I mean, is that... So out of everything that you mentioned, is directing like your first love? Is that what you like to do?
It is, because you get to build and create the world, that the story takes place in. I love working with actors. Obviously, I'm an actor myself, and so I really feel like I can understand, and everybody's process is very different, especially when it comes to acting. People have their own process. But I can kind of understand actors, because I am one. So, if I like to create an atmosphere on set where they can really explore and create that character, and bring their own nuances to it. And I do like to have some pre-work, if we can, in rehearsal, so that we can really dig deep into that character and find out what makes that character tick. Do they have any kind of little quirks that make them unique? And the actor can actually bring themselves to that character, and embody it.
Oh, so, all right, let me ask you a question. So I'm just an absolute junkie of all the great stuff that's happening in the digital TV world, from Netflix to Amazon to Paramount and Disney. And, I hear a lot of people go, oh boy, TV is dead. And I'm going, no, it's not. It's never been better. So out of all the stuff that you've been seeing for, let's say, I mean, particularly through the pandemic, where we've had a lot of time to watch, what series or show has impressed you the most where you watched it and said, wow, that directing was amazing?
Yeah, I think, my first choice right now in the last 12 months would definitely be The Queen's Gambit. I am a huge sort of history buff, and I love period dramas from any era. But if I could direct anything that was directed in the last 12 months, it would have been an episode of that show. I just think, the character was so complex. The whole tone of the show was so beautiful, and to make a game like chess, which is a very strategic game, sexy, was really nice. And it really drew me in, and I always mark, if I'm not looking for stuff to criticize in a show, like continuity or something like that, then get lost in it, then I know that that's great writing, great directing, and a great story, and that's what I aspire to, is like these very complex characters. I love that, and I love exploring those worlds, what makes them tick. And the thing is, like, the writing has to be so good, because without the writing, we've got nothing really. You can't make a bad script good, no matter how brilliant a director you are. So, but story is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. That was one of my favorites, between that and Ozark. I just thought Ozark was amazing. I mean, the writing, the directing, everything about it.
And a recent one, which I absolutely loved as well, was Halston, which was Ryan Murphy's camp, So really, really solid stuff coming out of Netflix at the minute. There's been so much, though, this past year, because we've been on lockdown, and I've had that luxury to watch TV, which I normally don't get, but it's been a really fantastic year for me. I've developed 3 TV pilots. I've completed one, and are on various drafts of the other 2. But it's just been, having this time for me has just been a gift. I've really used it to my advantage.
Great. We hear you're working on this exciting, let's call it a limited series, or used to be called miniseries. Now they're limited series.
It is series,
you're working on an 8-parter. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so the Marilyn Monroe story, basically, it's a kind of alternative history story. It's based on the last 6 months of her life, with an alternate ending. Basically, she doesn't die. She fakes her suicide and escapes Hollywood, because, she finds out that there's a hit on her life, because she's involved in affairs with the Kennedys. She knows a lot about the dealings of the mob and what's going on over there. She's fed up with the studios. She's sick and tired of them abusing her, and she owes them one last movie, and the only way out for her to kind of have some kind of calmness in her life is to literally leave Hollywood, and the only way that she can do that is through death. So it's a little bit like the Quentin Tarantino movie, where it has that alternate ending, which it's a fun, it's been fun to explore. The research that I've done is very, very extensive. And it's the world that I've created. I mean, it's, the 60s, it's hip, it's, 10 years, kind of like, the new Hollywood, where it's kind of going from the old studio system, and there's a lot of kind of excitement and hipness going on, and the cars, the music, the clothing, it's just been so wonderful to explore this period of time in 1962. So, Yeah, and it what I've loved about this story, and I think the most that I got from it is, we always see Marilyn being told from a male perspective, right? I don't think there's anything out there that has been written for TV by a woman. Um, and look, there's great content out there. I'm not knocking that. I've loved a lot of the films that I've seen of Marilyn, but unfortunately, they do play her one way. She's kind of the sex symbol, she's the dumb blonde. And so I want to give her a little bit more than that, because she was a very, very strong woman, to get where she did in her career, to become this icon, that's not a weak person, that's somebody that is constantly fighting. So, and the comebacks, and yeah, she was a drug addict, she had an addiction problem, but the way that she was treated through that, we explore a little bit of that as well. And it is almost like, in my version, she becomes this kind of like superhero that outsmarts everybody, to escape unharmed, and to dodge death, so it's kind of like a bit of an action adventure kind of, it's sexy, it's fun, there's a lot of stuff going on in it, which, but obviously we see her dark side as well, and her demons, and, ex-lovers trying to control her, and her doctors trying to control her, and, but again, she knows what's happening, she is very, very bright.
Sure. What stage is the project in right now?
So the pilot is written. There needs to be a few more drafts of it, but it's in a pretty good shape. I've had some great notes so far. Things like, oh my God, the cadence and the tone and the speech of the time captures the essence, which has been really cool because, obviously I'm British, right? I'm not American. So, I've been listening to a lot of her tapes. I've been listening to a lot of interviews. I've tried to catch her cadence in some of the dialogue. I've been reading a lot of books about her. There's a great one called Fragments, which is basically all her letters, that were found after she passed away, which really kind of is her sort of inner monologue, and her inner dialogue, and just questioning things, and and just this beautiful kind of insight into what she was feeling on a day-to-day basis as well.
I find it really fascinating that you decided to have an alternate ending to this, because most people know how she passed away and really what happened to her. And kind of like you mentioned, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's interesting, when I was watching that movie, I just thought it's going to end one way. And when it ended differently, I was really surprised. So I think this is going to be really interesting, and you are taking an interesting take on the story. The fact, what made you give it an alternate ending? I mean, I find it very interesting, and I'm glad you're doing it. But
pause for 1 second. I think I just got it.
So I find it really interesting, the fact that you have an alternate ending for your story, kind of what you were referring to the Quentin Tarantino, having an alternate ending for his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So what was your thought process, and what made you decide to go that route, to have an alternate ending?
Well, it's interesting. I've always kind of thought, we never see any pictures of Marilyn dead, right? All we see is her being taken out on a gurney with a blanket over her head, face down on the bed, with her hair, the back of her head. This whole sort of secrecy surrounding the funeral, no celebrities allowed, no press allowed, and all of this. And so that kind of, started me thinking, wow, what if it wasn't her? What if it was a body double, and she did actually just leave Hollywood, and just what she'd had enough and she was just sick and tired of it. And she kind of knew that, being dead, she would probably be worth more than being alive. And as we know, that is true because, the estate has gone on to make billions of dollars, right? Her name and her, all of the sort of paraphernalia that goes with her name. So that was very interesting to me. And then also, she was a woman that was coming into sort of like her mid 30s at a time in Hollywood when that happened, because she was seen a certain way. Where was she going to go in her career, right? And I think that because the studio sold her as this blonde bombshell sex symbol, how were they going to market her as anything else, right? And she kind of knew that. So it was more like, okay, I want to pay homage to this woman who is an icon for a start, and how did she get that status, and explore that. And because blondes were a dime a dozen back in the 50s and 60s in Hollywood, right? Yet she became this iconic sort of figure and a great actress. I mean, she was a genius, when you watch her films. I mean, they're so entertaining and she's just so engaging. So I just kind of wanted to pay a homage to her and give her the happy ending, That's really kind of my take on it, is to flip the script of her being this crazy sort of, no hope loser who just is an alcoholic drug addict, to kind of really playing more on her strengths,
Sure. When do you think the audience is going to get to see this, and where do you think they'll see it?
Well, Netflix would be the perfect home. They do have a conflict right now because they're doing they're actually adapting a book into a movie about Marilyn Monroe. But I think, this could have any home really, but I think the way that Netflix operate, and they kind of give a little bit more freedom in their storytelling, it's like that would be a perfect home. And the other great thing about this story is it's not only for like women, right? There's all this kind of excitement with the Kennedys and the mob. So guys are really going to get like a big thrill out of watching this. And it's kind of like Mad Men, I don't know. It's kind of got that vibe about it, where there's a lot of guys kind of trying to orchestrate this woman's life, and she just really is having none of it, so she just manipulates and plays them to get what she wants.
Sure. Let's put you on the spot for a second. If you had to pick one Marilyn project movie as your favorite, what is it?
Oh, my week with Marilyn, I think by far that is one of the most compelling stories I've seen. Michelle Williams is probably the best Marilyn I've ever seen portrayed on screen. She really captured the essence of her character. The story's great. Putting Marilyn outside of her comfort zone as well added a lot of layers to that story. Because she was going to London expecting to be this great sort of, serious actress, and she found out that, Laurence Olivier just saw her as the ditzy blonde, and was having none of it. So, yeah, very, very compelling, that one.
Sure. If you had to pick one of Marilyn's movies, and if somebody who, let's say, doesn't really know Marilyn, you had to recommend one Marilyn movie, which movie would it be?
Oh God, it's a real toss up between Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and Some Like It Hot. I mean, those are my two favorites, and I think, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is like just the tip of the iceberg over if I have to pick one.
So, as you were doing the research to write the screenplay, what are some of the things that you found out about Marilyn that perhaps you didn't know before you started on the project?
Yeah, I think it was actually, her strength that really came through on the research. The other thing which really surprised me was that she had an affair with Bobby Kennedy, and apparently was pregnant by him, but lost the baby. She'd had several abortions in her life. So, back then, plus she had like endometriosis, which is an inflammation of the womb, and the ovaries, which at that time people didn't really know an awful lot about. So it did make it difficult for her to actually carry a pregnancy. And just really, I think the amount of pills that she was taking, and mixed in with this champagne drinking and her connections to the mob as well. Like, I didn't realize that she was so connected to them.
And that was mostly through Peter Lawford, right? I mean, her connections with Peter Lawford and...
No, the studios.
Oh,
it was
studios.
actually... Yeah, 20th Century Fox. Back then the unions were run by the mob. Johnny Rosselli was like the teamster, and back in the early day, they were extorting Hollywood for all this money, in Chicago. So yeah, it's a big history there. And I love that. And I've always wanted to do a mob story, because I find it fascinating. So now I get the best of both worlds. And there's some great scenes in this one with the mob, like with Connor and all his gang, Frank Sinatra.
Should I let her know you're looking for a part to be in the mobster scene?
No. I don't want to be in that one.
Oh, I see you more as one of the 20th Century Fox, executives. I can totally see you smoking a big fat cigar.
I can do that. Whenever people tell me they want to write me into a movie, I only say only if I can be a Brooklyn gangster, because I can do that one really without acting. Anyway, Kate, this is wonderful to catch up with you. I think the last time we saw each other was probably at Sundance or someplace.
AFM, I think it was.
Yeah. That's right. I knew it was at one of those functions. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best on this project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled that I was able to chat about it. So you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Alrighty, bye. Thank you.
Start it up.
Welcome back to the show. Larry, I'm just really intrigued, and actually I want to say I'm really happy the fact that we've had so many great guests on the show talking about Marilyn, and honestly I've learned so much by listening to these guests. But you know what, it's interesting because it's widening the mystery about Marilyn.
Yeah.
So nobody's really answering one way or another. Like, I think everybody has their own view of what happened, and I think that's what makes it special, right? That's what makes this mystery special, because there's not one answer.
Yeah, well, you have now, the phenomenon of social media, which just not just keeps these things alive, but basically amplifies them and makes them global, because everybody's now, has access to these same, podcasts and TV shows and everything. I mean, you even take, your favorite Clubhouse and stuff. There are these, these events that, feature Marilyn and Marilyn Monroe and stuff. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing. And, as we go into the 60th anniversary, I mean, you're going to see it even accelerate even more. So, it's top of mind for a lot of people.
I see that a lot on social media, and it's definitely picking up. I see influencers, imitating Marilyn, trying to be her, even 59 years later after her death. And you have this new generation that is really following what Marilyn did back then. So that I find that fascinating, and it only widens the mystery. Right?
Yeah, when you reach that iconic status as Marilyn has, it just keeps going on and on and on. And talking about icons, we have to promote, and we've been told that we have to promote this.
Yeah, I heard that too.
On the next episode of Fanvestor Report, they've actually got a special guest. Jesslyn has Jonny Vegas. Jonny Vegas.
Now, you've met him before, right?
I met John. I know Jonny Vegas almost from the time he was born.
Yeah.
And but he's got a fascinating story. I mean, not just where he is today, but you're talking about a 15-year-old kid who's come diagnosed with brain cancer and has gone through that, and then then has experience with the Make-A-Wish Foundation and Frank Shankowitz, who started that, and they provided wishes, and he went on to play, lacrosse for Turkey and Israel and stuff like that. So that should be an interesting show for Jesslyn to have the Jonny Vegas experience.
Yeah, all kidding aside, he's actually a cool guy. I met him a few times. Anyway, he manages our studio, so I get to see him, got to know him now, and he's a cool guy, so I'm looking forward to watching that segment. But I want to come back to Marilyn, because I think having these wonderful guests that, I want to thank all of them to be on the show, because they really brought such a great perspective to this show. Right, Larry? I mean, to have him to be here with us, like George Shakiris, wonderful, wonderful gentleman, and all these other guests that were able to come in and talk about Marilyn. I really want to thank them so much for being on the show. And maybe next year you and I can go out there and in LA by her, gravesite and do the show live.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting. It'll be a very exciting time.
Yeah, so I want to thank you guys for watching. It's I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please consider subscribing to this podcast. And also, if you leave a comment, Larry and I take the time to read the comments and get back to you guys. If you want to see anything on the show, please let us know in your comments, and we try to accommodate you. So thank you for watching. We really appreciate it, and we will see you on the next show.
We will.